I grew up in Brantford, and I swore I'd never move back to Brantford. Paris I had never considered. At the time when I moved here, Paris was a pretty small town and not a lot going on. So, but which is kind of the reason why I moved out here. Working as an artist of any kind, right? You're never going to be rich. You end up going where you can afford to go, and I think the trick is you go somewhere, buy a house and stay there, and wait for other artists to come, and then all the rich people will come to your town and make your house worth more money. So I put this on to hold whatever paper I'm going to use. Traditionally, people would put little pins, guide pins on here, and they'd set them in exactly the same spot. And there's some real traditional people that are quite finicky about that. And I use like my own homemade way of doing things. And the reason being is, if this, what I put on here doesn't line up in the right spot, or I need to move it, or the colors don't line up, then I can just adjust this piece of paper around to the printing plate that's going to stick on here. Things are a lot easier when you're self-taught, because there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's an illusion. People say, oh, you're self-employed, you're so lucky, you work from home. Doing what I do now, like selling work online, you have customers on the other side of the world, and they want to talk to you in the middle of the night. You don't have as much freedom, and there's a lot of times where I would say, oh, I just want to get a job. I just want to get a normal job. I don't want to have to worry about customers, right? I was 15 when I started working as a photographer. I was photographing weddings in Brantferd. I went on to photograph close to or over 1,000 weddings in my life. It was a cool life. It was a good existence. A lot of parties, a lot of fun. But it was a really pretentious kind of business. I got burned out really fast. I think I was too young. Right? I was in my very early 20s. And I decided that was it. I was going to quit. I was going to get a job just doing whatever. And I took a job at a printing plant just as a temporary guy. And my job was to put newspapers in this little stack thing. Printing plates are really expensive to make, so I try to cram as many things on as I can before I make them. This is kind of an archaic process, so what I need to do is spin this wheel and then run over there and press the button once it gets going. I was pretty eager to learn something different or do something different. And they had this Macintosh computer there. I said, oh, cool, you got a Mac. And they said, hey, you know what this is? And I said, yeah, it's a Mac, right? And they said, do you know how to turn it on? And I ended up getting contracted by the Globe and Mail as a Mac specialist. They sent me to school in Rochester to study color science and to work with people from Kodak and stuff like that. So I really got to learn a lot about that industry as it was developing. It was a pretty fortunate experience. And I thought, wow, I should really take this and do it on my own. Once it's all set up, just standing here and doing this, half an hour, I guess, for 100. And then cleaning the press. Going back and forth with the customer and making the design takes the longest. That's the longest part of it. That's the bulk of what I do is the design. I do this just so that I don't have to pay someone else to do it. I had this thing I said to a friend of mine. I said, I don't care what I do as long as it can't be downloaded. I have zero interest in being a printer or a letterpress person or anything. I wanted to do design work and I wanted to make it different and I wanted to make it real. There's something to be said about a machine that's 100 years old and just keeps going day after day after day. I want to do things the way that they've always been done, kind of, I guess. Like with paint and making paint, it's one of those things like, well, when you go in and buy a tube of paint and you look at one tube of paint and it's $10. Another tube of paint is $100, right? And you think, well, how hard could it be to make paint? I mean, people did it. Well, people have done it for millions of years, right? Never mind hundreds of years. And really, you're just crushing pigments and you're grinding them into a binder. And there's the paint is so much different than what you buy in a store. Right. So what you're doing when you're making paint is you're basically taking the pigment and making it like float in the binder. Once the pigment is in the binder, then it can be re-wetted and put onto the paper. And there is a big difference with store-bought watercolor paint versus this kind. I find one is the pigment quantity of pigment is much higher when you make your own paint. So it's much more vibrant. Like it's very, like when it goes on the paper, it's like, wow, that's seriously there, right? It takes a long time to make. This process itself takes a while, and then the pouring in the pans takes a good week or two to fill one of these. Handmade should be two things. It should be cheaper and it should be better made. People want to buy something that's handmade, but they don't want to see the hands. They think they should be able to bargain with you and get it for a better price, but it should also be better made and higher quality than someone that has an endless supply of funds and equipment and tools. I seem to be really gifted at learning skills that become obsolete. Photography, newspaper printing, right? So I'm kind of thinking, okay, it's just a matter of time before art gets automated or graphic design becomes automated or something, right? And being a graphic designer, a print designer, being an artist, there's not a lot of jobs, right? So if you don't do it for yourself, you quite often don't have a choice. You have to do it for yourself because people aren't going to hire you to do it. When I'm talking to other artists, people say, well, I'm going to charge $10,000 for my painting. And that's great. You can charge whatever you want for your painting, but it doesn't mean anyone's going to buy it, right? They're free to charge whatever they want, and they can work at Starbucks and they can paint. Or you can paint and you can sell your work at a reasonable price, enjoy the process, and put a roof over your head and support your family. All right, so that color is done. So you can see it starts like this and then finishes the difference, right?
Crumbling at the knees.